It was 1 in the morning when my brother kicked me out. I remember because I checked my phone right before he started pounding on the door. The tropical storm had just made landfall, and the rain was hammering against the windows of his Miami Beach condo so hard I thought the glass might shatter. I was sleeping on his couch, like I had been for the past 3 weeks since our parents died. That's when I heard Tiffany's voice, high and excited, cutting through the sound of the storm. "Brandon, the lighting is perfect. This is exactly the aesthetic I need. Moody, apocalyptic, raw. My followers are going to eat this up." My brother's voice came next, that fake patient tone he used when he was about to do something cruel but wanted to seem reasonable. "Maya, get up. We need you out. Now." I sat up, disoriented. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see palm trees bending nearly horizontal in the wind. "Out?" "Brandon, there's a tropical storm." I'm aware. He was already picking up my things, shoving them into a trash bag. My laptop, my clothes, the framed photo of our parents I'd salvaged from their house. Everything went in like garbage. Tiffany needs to shoot content at the motel. The storm creates this incredible ambiance, and we can't wait until morning. The whole vibe will be gone. Tiffany appeared behind him, holding her ring light and iPhone gimbal. She didn't even look at me. This is going to be my best post yet. Finding beauty in ruins. The algorithm is going to love it. "Brandon, it's the middle of the night. In a storm." I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel my hands shaking. "I have nowhere to go." He shoved the trash bag into my arms. "You have the motel. That's somewhere. Look, Maya, I'm sorry, but you need to understand. I have a mortgage on this place. Tiffany has a brand to maintain. We're building something here. That motel is it's dead weight. You should probably just sell the land anyway. Mom and Dad left me that property for a reason." "Yeah, because it was worthless, and they felt sorry for you." He was already walking to the door, opening it. The wind immediately grabbed it, slamming it against the wall. Rain sprayed into the pristine white entryway. "The motel hasn't operated since Hurricane Irma. It's a roach motel, Maya. Literally. Do yourself a favor and demolish it." I stood there, soaked before I even stepped outside, watching my brother's face. There was no guilt there, no hesitation, just impatience, like I was an Uber driver taking too long to arrive. Tiffany was already adjusting her camera settings, completely oblivious to anything but her shot list. "This dump is worth more as content than as your crash pad," Brandon said. Then he closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a full minute, listening to the storm, feeling the weight of the trash bag in my arms. Then I started walking. The Uber driver looked at me like I was insane when I told him I needed to go to Fort Lauderdale. In a tropical storm. At 1:30 in the morning. I didn't blame him. I felt insane. But I also felt something else. Something cold and calculating settling into place in my chest. I stopped thinking like a sister. I stopped thinking like a victim. I started thinking like what I was. A junior accountant who knew how to read numbers, spot patterns, and follow trails that other people missed. The motel sat 3 blocks from the beach, a relic from the 1960s that had somehow survived decades of hurricanes and development. 60 rooms arranged in a U-shape around a cracked swimming pool. Half the doors were rusted shut. The neon sign that once said Surfside Paradise now just flickered weakly, missing most of its letters. When my parents died 6 months ago, the lawyer had handed me the deed with an apologetic look. Meanwhile, Brandon got the Miami Beach condo, the one our parents had supposedly bought as an investment property 5 years ago. $2 million of pristine waterfront real estate versus a condemned motel that smelled like mold and regret. I'd asked the lawyer about it. "Why the huge disparity? Your parents specified this arrangement in their will," he'd said. "I'm just following their instructions." Brandon had laughed when he found out. Actually laughed. I guess they knew who the successful one was going to be. Now, standing in front of the motel in the driving rain, I understood something my brother didn't. Our parents were both numbers people. Dad had been a tax attorney. Mom had been a CPA. They didn't do anything without a reason. And they definitely didn't make financial decisions based on favoritism. I managed to pry open the door to room 12. The room smelled like abandonment and sea air. No electricity, no water, just concrete walls and a mattress that probably had things growing in it I didn't want to identify. I used my phone flashlight to survey the space. It was, objectively, awful. But I'd slept in worse. Sort of. Actually, no, I hadn't. But I was going to now. I lay down on the floor, too disgusted to touch the mattress, and listened to the storm tear at the building. And that's when I started thinking about the numbers. The property tax bill had come 2 weeks ago, forwarded from my parents' old address. I'd almost thrown it away without opening it, assuming it would be a few $100s for a worthless property. But something made me look. The bill was for $47,000, annually. I'd stared at that number for a long time. $47,000 in property taxes meant the county assessed this place at what, $15 million? Maybe more? That made no sense. The motel was falling apart. The land couldn't be worth that much. I'd checked comparable properties in the area. Everything similar was assessed under $2 million. So either the county had made a massive mistake, or there was something about this property I didn't know. I fell asleep, running calculations in my head, listening to the rain. When I woke up, the storm had passed. Pale sunlight filtered through the broken blinds, and I could hear seagulls screaming outside. My back hurt, my neck was stiff, and I was more determined than ever to figure out what my parents had been hiding. I started with the property records. Using the motel's Wi-Fi, which miraculously still worked in the office, I pulled up every document I could find. Purchase history, building permits, inspection records. The motel had been bought by my parents 23 years ago for $300,000. They'd filed permits for standard repairs over the years, nothing unusual. But then, 15 years ago, there was a permit for basement waterproofing and climate control installation. Basement? The motel didn't have a basement. At least, I'd never seen one. I spent the next 3 hours exploring every inch of the property. The old office, the supply rooms, the boiler room that hadn't been used in years. Nothing. Just dust and decay and the overwhelming smell of mildew. Then I noticed the power lines. Most of the motel was dark, had been for years, but one circuit was still active. I could hear the hum of electricity running somewhere. I followed the conduit, tracing it from the main panel. It ran along the ceiling of the office, then disappeared into the wall. I tracked it from outside, watching where the line went. It ran underground, toward what I'd always assumed was just a storage shed behind the property. The shed was padlocked, but the lock was new. Someone had been here recently. I used the crowbar from my car, the one I kept for emergencies. The lock broke on the third try. Inside the shed, there was nothing but a concrete floor and exposed walls. But when I looked closer, I saw the seams. A section of the floor was separate from the rest, and there was a small panel hidden behind a piece of rotted plywood. My hands were shaking as I cleared away the debris. The panel was electronic, with a keypad. I tried my birthday. Nothing. I tried my parents' anniversary. Nothing. Then I tried something else. Something that came to me like muscle memory. The date they'd bought this place, formatted as 6 digits. The panel beeped, and I heard something unlock beneath my feet. A section of the floor slid open, revealing a staircase going down into darkness, and I could feel it immediately. The rush of cold, climate-controlled air coming up from below. I used my phone flashlight and descended. The stairs were modern, well-maintained, completely at odds with the decay above. At the bottom was a door, heavy, steel, with another keypad. I used the same code. The door opened. I'm not sure what I expected to find. Maybe my parents' personal belongings, maybe old files from their work, maybe nothing at all. What I found was a vault, a proper, museum-quality, climate-controlled vault that had to be at least 3,000 square feet. The walls were lined with climate control systems, security monitors, and most importantly, art. Dozens of pieces, each carefully mounted, each with its own environmental controls and security sensors. I recognized some of them immediately. Not because I was an art expert, but because I'd seen them before. In news articles, in FBI reports, in documentaries about art theft. I walked slowly along the wall, reading the small plaques beneath each piece. Portrait of a young man, attributed to Rembrandt. Recovered 1,998. The Concert Study, attributed to Vermeer. Recovered 2001. Still Life with Flowers, Pablo Picasso. Recovered 2004. My parents hadn't just been a tax attorney and a CPA. They'd been something else entirely. The evidence was all here, in filing cabinets along the back wall. Contracts with the FBI art crime team. Authentication reports. Provenance research. Recovery documentation. For nearly 30 years, my parents had been silent partners in one of the most successful art recovery operations in the country. They authenticated pieces, traced ownership, helped return stolen art to museums and private collectors. But not all of it got returned. Some pieces, the ones with unclear provenance or disputed ownership, ended up here, held in trust, waiting for authentication to be complete, for legal claims to be settled. There was a letter, too, in my mother's handwriting, dated 1 week before they died. Maya, if you're reading this, it means you found the vault. We always knew you would. You have your father's attention to detail, and my instinct for patterns. We also knew your brother would never look. Brandon sees what he wants to see, and he wants easy answers. This collection represents 30 years of work. Most of it needs to be donated to museums once authentication is complete. The files will tell you which pieces go where, but some of it, the pieces we personally recovered and have clear title to, are yours to do with as you wish. We've listed them in the attached document. We gave Brandon the condo because he needs visible success. He needs to show off. You were never like that. You were always patient, always willing to dig deeper. The motel was protection. Brandon would never see value in it, which means he'd never fight you for it. And now you have something he doesn't. A choice about what kind of person you want to be. We love you both, but we trusted you with this. Mom, I sat on the floor of the vault for a long time, reading and rereading the letter. Then I started going through the files. The next 2 months were a blur. I moved into one of the motel rooms, the only one I could make semi-habitable. I couch-surfed with my college roommate on weekends when I needed a real shower. During the day, I worked my regular job. At night, I worked on the collection. I contacted the museums listed in my parents' files. I hired authentication experts to verify provenance. I coordinated with the FBI to ensure everything was legal and documented. Most of the collection, about 40 pieces worth roughly $45 million, went to museums. Donations in my parents' names. Their legacy, properly honored. But 3 pieces were mine. A Rembrandt sketch valued at $8 million. A Picasso painting valued at $7 million. And a small Vermeer study that Christie's estimated could bring in $15 million at auction. Maybe more, if the right buyers showed up. I chose the Vermeer. I needed cash, not art. And the Vermeer had the clearest provenance and the most market interest. Christie's handled everything. The auction was private, exclusive. Exactly the kind of event where serious money moved quietly. The Vermeer sold for $17.2 million. After fees and taxes, I cleared $14.6 million. Brandon didn't know about any of this. He'd stopped calling after he kicked me out, except for one text message asking if I'd finally torn down that dump. Tiffany had posted her storm photos at the motel, carefully angled to avoid showing anything identifiable. Her followers loved it. She gained 3,000 new subscribers. I let them think they'd won. I let them think I was struggling. I even let Brandon think I was still living at the motel when he drove by once and saw my car there. What I was actually doing was building something. I used $6 million to buy a small accounting firm that specialized in art valuation and estate planning. The previous owner was retiring, and the client list was exactly what I needed. Galleries, collectors, museums, all of them needing forensic accounting and authentication services. I used another $4 million to renovate the motel. Not into a motel, but into a climate-controlled art storage and authentication facility. The kind of place where serious collectors could store pieces securely, where museums could send works for analysis, where provenance research could be conducted with proper equipment and security. I kept the vault, expanded it, and added 3 more just like it. The remaining money went into investments, living expenses, and one very good lawyer. Because I'd found something else in my parents' files. Something about Brandon's condo. Something he probably hoped no one would ever discover. The condo hadn't been an investment property our parents bought. It had been purchased with money from our family trust, money that was supposed to be divided equally between us after they died. But Brandon had access to the trust as co-executor, and he'd used that access to buy himself a $2 million condo, then convinced our parents to put it in their name temporarily for tax purposes. Our parents probably never knew. They'd trusted him. But the numbers didn't lie. And I was very good with numbers. I had the documentation ready when Brandon finally found out about the vault. I don't know how he discovered it. Maybe he got curious about the property taxes. Maybe Tiffany wanted to shoot more content and actually explored the property. Maybe he just got lucky. What I do know is that he showed up at my new office, the one attached to the art storage facility, with Tiffany and a lawyer, demanding his share of the art collection. I was in the middle of an authentication meeting with a curator from the Met, but I excused myself. This was going to be good. Brandon's face was red, the vein in his forehead pulsing the way it always did when he was furious but trying to stay calm. Tiffany was filming on her phone, probably planning another dramatic confrontation post. The lawyer looked uncomfortable, like he already knew this wasn't going to go the way Brandon hoped. "Maya, we need to talk about Mom and Dad's art collection," Brandon said, using that same fake reasonable tone. "I understand you've been handling the estate, but clearly this is a significant asset that should be divided equally." "Which art collection?" I asked. "Don't play dumb. The one in the vault. Under the motel. The one you've apparently been selling off without telling me." "Oh, that collection. The one Mom and Dad left specifically to me, in a separate document from the will, because it was stored on my property, titled in my name." His lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Chen, you mentioned this was part of your parents' general estate." "It is. Just because it was stored at her property doesn't mean— Actually, it does." I pulled out the folder I'd been keeping ready for this exact moment. Every piece in that vault was either personally recovered by our parents, properly transferred to them for authentication, or donated to them by clients. All of it is documented. All of it has clear title, and all of it was left specifically to me, in writing, with proper legal documentation. I handed copies to the lawyer. He started reading, and I watched his expression shift from professional neutrality to carefully controlled surprise. "Furthermore," I continued, "I've already donated most of the collection to museums, as per our parents' wishes. The 3 pieces I kept were explicitly noted as mine to dispose of. I sold one, authenticated and legally, through Christie's. The proceeds from that sale were used to purchase my business and renovate this facility." Brandon was shaking now. "That's impossible. They wouldn't have left you everything. They wouldn't have. They also wouldn't have wanted you to embezzle from the family trust to buy yourself a condo." I pulled out another folder. "But you did. $2.1 million. Withdrawn in incremental amounts over 3 years. all properly disguised as investment expenses. Used to purchase a property in Miami Beach, which you then convinced our parents to title in their name for supposed tax advantages. Except, there were no tax advantages, Brandon. You just needed to hide what you'd done until after they died and you could claim it as your inheritance. The lawyer's eyebrows went up. Tiffany's phone was still recording, but her hand had dropped slightly. She was staring at Brandon. I don't know what you're talking about. I have the bank records, the wire transfers, the documentation showing exactly how you structured each withdrawal to avoid triggering audit flags. You were careful, I'll give you that. But you weren't careful enough. His lawyer was now reading the documents I'd provided with obvious alarm. Mr. Chen, these allegations are very serious. If this documentation is accurate, it's completely accurate, I said. I'm a forensic accountant. This is literally what I do. And I've had 6 months to build an airtight case. Brandon looked at Tiffany, probably hoping for support. She was staring at her phone screen, watching the video she'd just recorded, her face pale. I could practically see the calculation happening behind her eyes. Brandon, exposed as a fraud. Brandon, potentially facing criminal charges. Brandon, about to lose everything. That wasn't the kind of content her followers wanted. That wasn't the aesthetic she'd built her brand on. I think I need to go, she said quietly. Then she left. Just walked out without another word. Brandon called after her, but she didn't turn around. Maya, please. His voice cracked. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. We can work this out. We're family. You don't want to destroy me over this. You're right, I said. I don't want to destroy you. I want you to face consequences. There's a difference. I handed him one more document. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to voluntarily transfer the condo title to me, as repayment for the trust funds you stole. You're going to sign a statement acknowledging what you did. In exchange, I won't press criminal charges, and I'll allow you to continue living in the condo for 6 months while you figure out your next move. You can't be serious. After 6 months, the condo becomes part of my property portfolio. I'll be converting it into corporate housing for visiting artists and authenticators who need temporary accommodation in Miami. You're welcome to apply to be the property manager. The position pays $60,000 a year. His lawyer was nodding slowly. Mr. Chen, I strongly advise you to accept these terms. The alternative is criminal prosecution for embezzlement, which carries a potential sentence of, I know what it carries. Brandon's hands were shaking. He looked at me. Really looked at me, probably for the first time in years. You planned this. All of this. No, I said. I just paid attention. I read the numbers. I followed the patterns. I did exactly what Mom and Dad trained me to do. You could have done the same thing, Brandon. They loved you too. They wanted to teach you too, but you were always too busy trying to look successful to actually be successful. He signed the documents. All of them. His lawyer witnessed, looking relieved that this wasn't going to turn into a criminal case he'd have to defend. After they left, I went back to my meeting with the Met curator. We discussed the Rembrandt authentication, the security protocols for the new vault, the timeline for the exhibition my parents' collection would be part of. Professional, productive, exactly the kind of conversation my parents would have had. That was 8 months ago. The facility is thriving now. We handle authentication for 3 major museums, storage for 12 private collectors, and provenance research for auction houses across the country. I've hired 4 employees, all specialists in art history and conservation. The business is profitable, growing, and building exactly the kind of reputation that takes decades to establish. Brandon is still living in the condo, but his 6 months are almost up. He applied for the property manager position. I haven't decided yet if I'll hire him. Part of me wants to see him succeed, wants to give him the chance our parents would have given him. Part of me remembers standing in a tropical storm at 1 a.m, holding a trash bag full of my belongings, listening to him call my inheritance worthless. The other day, I was organizing my parents' files when I found one more letter. This one from my father, written the same week as my mother's. Maya, your brother sees the world as a stage. He needs an audience, applause, validation. That's not wrong. It's just who he is. But you've always seen the world as a puzzle. You like finding the pieces, understanding how they fit, solving for X. That's why we trusted you with this. The art isn't the real inheritance. The real inheritance is knowing that success isn't about what people see. It's about what you build when no one's watching. It's about being patient enough to let the numbers tell their story. It's about choosing substance over performance. Your brother got the stage. You got the puzzle. We loved you both enough to give you what you needed, not what you wanted. We believe in you. Dad, I keep that letter in my desk drawer. Sometimes, when I'm working late, handling authentication reports, or reviewing storage protocols, I read it again, and I think about the choice my parents gave me, the puzzle they left me to solve. I think about how my brother saw a worthless motel, and I saw a mystery. I think about how he saw trash, and I saw potential. And I think about how sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's building something they could never understand. Something that requires patience, attention to detail, and the willingness to dig deeper than the surface. Something that turns a rundown motel into a vault worth millions. Something that turns being kicked out in a storm into a second chance. Something that turns inheritance into legacy. I rebuilt the neon sign last month. It doesn't say Surfside Paradise anymore. Now it says Chen Art Authentication and Storage. My parents' name. My name. The legacy they actually left us. The one Brandon never bothered to look for. The sign is visible from the highway. Brandon drives past it every time he comes to see me about his property manager application. I wonder if he understands yet what our parents were trying to teach us. I wonder if he ever will. But that's his puzzle to solve, not mine. Mine is already complete.